A lot of them to go around. Center section here used to be trading floors. It's offices now. Not as much support in the middle part of the building. The architects were a little concerned that eventually these towers might start leaning in towards one another because there's not as much support here in the middle. So to solve that problem, every floor from the first floor to the 21st floor extends out towards the street 1/8 of an inch. From the 22nd floor to the top, 1/8 of an inch per floor back towards the middle. So just that teeny little adjustment, 1/8 of an inch per floor, solve the problem. These things don't lean in on one another straight up and down. This is the Chicago Civic Opera building, 1929 building by Graham Anderson, Probst and White, home of the Chicago Lyric Opera. Their auditorium is right behind this wall. And we are far enough away from it. If you look up, it looks like a giant throne, like a giant high-back chair. There's an urban legend about this building. The man who commissioned the building, paid for a big portion of it, was a very wealthy Chicagoan named Samuel Insull. The legend is that he had a girlfriend who was an opera singer, not well received in New York. So he had this building built for her so she'd have a place to perform here in Chicago. The building is often called Insull's Throne because it looks like a giant throne. It's facing west, turning his back forever on the East Coast that was mean to his girlfriend. It's a cool story, not a lick of truth to it. It's absolutely false. It's a cool story, but that building was completed in 1929. Of course, the stock market crashed, the Depression hit. Insull, incredibly wealthy, lost everything during the Depression. Just 9 years after that building was completed, he died in the subways of Paris, just had 84 cents in his pocket. So in the span of 9 years, he went from being incredibly wealthy to basically not having much of anything. Now the other side of the bridge here, you'll see a Starbucks logo. Chicago has the distinction of having the very first Starbucks that was not in Seattle. First venture out of the Seattle market. Now they're everywhere. It was down by Willis Tower where we just were. Now this red brick building, it's the Great Lakes building. It's a 1912 building by Halliburton Roche. The building itself is not that significant. What is significant though is this location. Back in 1860, there was a temporary building here back then. This was the site of the Second Republican National Convention. This is where they nominated Abraham Lincoln to be their nominee for the presidency. Of course, he went on to become the 16th president of the United States. This is also the location where they signed the Emancipation Proclamation. If you look at, if you're visiting Illinois, look at our license plates, Illinois, it's the land of Lincoln. We're going to head back out into the main branch right now. This river walk that you see here extends all the way from right over here, Lake Street, all the way to Lake Michigan. And you can walk all the way to Lake Michigan. You never have to go up on top of a street to cross, you don't never have to go up on top of a bridge to cross the street. You always walk underneath the bridges all the way to Lake Michigan. The building over here though, this curved glass building, 333 Wacker Drive by Cone Pedersen and Fox of New York. It's a good example of what architects call contextualism. It's in context with the building site. It curves where the river curves. It's faced with green glass. Acknowledges the fact that we are on the Chicago River. Always voted the most beautiful building on the Chicago River. But if you remember the old movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, there's a scene in the movie where Ferris Bueller's dad is up in his office looking down at the parade that Ferris Bueller was in. He was singing Twist and Shout with some ladies in the German Day Parade. This is the building that Ferris Bueller's dad's office was in. What they don't show you in the movie, though, is that the parade was actually about 3/4 of a mile south of here. Could not have seen any part of the parade for any of the windows in that building. Actually, if you pull out the movie, this building right over here to the left, not even there. You look clear through to the next building. Now, if you're walking around town this evening, like around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, come to this grid space between Franklin and Wells. If you look at that glass panel over there, if you look past it, there's a whole bunch of projectors over there. That is the largest projection system in the world right now. Every night at 8:30 and 9 o'clock, We project art on the face of the merchandise mart. The entire face of this building is the projection screen. It's truly something incredible to see. It's called Art on the Mart. And the program is put to music too. So if you're in this grid space, you'll hear the music that goes along with the program. You'll have the ringside seat. But it's about a 20-minute program. It plays at 8:30, and there's a little intermission, and then they play it again at 9 o'clock. But it happens every night. It's free. Just come to this grid space. Actually, you can see it. Any place you can see that great big building, you can see it. But if you're right over here, you'll hear the music too. If you've been walking around town at one point or another, you've probably been on Wacker Drive. This is Wacker Drive. Charles Wacker was one of the first commissioners in the Daniel Burnham Commission. Daniel Burnham had a master plan for Chicago, the City Beautiful plan. We were one of the first cities in the world to have a master plan. But one of the things in the plan, Daniel Burnham wanted us to be, as he called it, Paris on the prairie. He wanted us to have a beautiful roadway along the river, the way Paris does along the Seine. So that fulfills that part of the Daniel Burnham plan. Now look, there's a wedding. Actually, this evening, there's going to be a wedding on this boat. Somebody chartered the boat and they're going to have a wedding here. Maybe it's them. I don't know. Now, at this big happy event, I hate to tell you about the disaster that happened over here. Back in 1915, the Western Electric Company had an outing for their employees. The boat that it was on flipped over. 844 people died. So talk about bad juxtaposition. You got a wedding over here, then I'm telling you about how all these people died in 1915. The building coming up here, this big gray building, is the home of Tony the Tiger, Snap Crackle Pop, the Jolly Green Giant, Pillsbury Doughboy, Marlboro Man. That is the Leo Burnett building. It's the headquarters for the Leo Burnett Advertising Agency, designed by two Irish architects, Kevin Roche and John Pinkaloo. Now, when we get to the other side of, did you ever hear the family, the Walendas, tightrope walking family? 2016, Nick Walenda came to Chicago. He walked a tightrope from the top of this gray building, across the river, all the way to the top of Marina City. There's a 19-foot difference, so the tightrope was at an angle. No harness, no net, no anything, but from the top of that building to that building. When he got to the top of this building, he put on a blindfold, walked a tightrope blindfolded from one tower to the other tower. Again, no harness, no net. A lot of really, really nervous people watching. See that dark building there? It has a gold spire coming up out of the top of it. That is the Carbon and Carbide building. It used to be offices, now it's a hotel. But that building was designed by two of Daniel Burnham's sons, the Burnham brothers. They were at a New Year's Eve party during Prohibition. They saw a bottle of champagne, decided it would be an appropriate protest against Prohibition to design a building based on a bottle of champagne. It's clad in dark green terracotta. There is gold leaf at the top, but the building is inspired by a bottle of champagne. Right here behind the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, former Jewelers Building. The fancy structure all the way up at the top there, it's called a Belvedere. It's an architect's office up there right now, but back during Prohibition, that was the speakeasy there. It was called the Stratosphere Lounge. You know, speakeasies were supposed to be secret, nobody's supposed to know about them. Everybody in Chicago knew about this place. It was Chicago, you know. Tall, skinny building over here, Mather Tower. It's kind of out of proportion. It was supposed to have been a twin tower. There was supposed to have been another one right next to it, but that one was completed in 1929. Stock market crashed. They never built the second one. But you see the new section of the London House right there. If you look up, you see some people up there, some palm trees. If you feel like a cocktail or a glass of wine later on, they have probably the most beautiful rooftop bar in town over there, especially at night when all the lights in the building come on. Beautiful, beautiful views up there. Beautiful rooftop bar. A couple days ago, the sun was kind of beating down on you like a broiler. So even though it's a little cloudy, much more comfortable up there today, I think. Mention this little structure at the top here. Looks like a little cupola. It's called the Tempe Eddy. The hotel, the London House, has this interesting little program. If you want to propose to your significant other, they'll take you up underneath the Tempe Eddy. Beautiful views. There's a kneeler. You can get down on your knees, propose on your knees, and after you pop the big question, they give you a big bottle of champagne to celebrate the big event. You got to make sure you're going to get the right answer. It costs $1,000 to do that. So if the answer that you get is, oh, I don't know, why don't we just stay friends? You just bought yourself $1,000 bottle of champagne. This building over here on the left looks like a big cathedral at the top, is Chicago's Tribune Tower. That building was the result of a competition for architects to design and build the most beautiful office building in the world. Robert McCormick, the president of the Tribune, had this competition for architects. That was the winning entry by Raymond Hood and John Mead Howells of New York. They won a $100,000 prize back in 1920 for that. Now when we pass the Hyatt, these gray or these brown brick buildings, right behind it you can see that tall white building. Real strong vertical lines on the windows there. That is the Aon Center. Back in 1974, that was the Standard Oil building. 1974, clad in really beautiful white Carrara marble slabs. Big problem though, the slabs were only cut a ½ inch thick. So after 9 hot summers and cold winters, these things started to break. They started to delaminate and fall off the building. Not a time you wanted to be hanging around the base of that building. These marble slabs were falling off. They tried everything to get these things to stay on the building. Nothing worked. So finally, in 1990, they had to make the big decision to reclad the entire building. It took 2 years, $80 million. About half of what it cost to build the building in the first place. They had to take off 43,000 slabs of marble, replaced it with 43,000 slabs of white North Carolina granite that was cut in the waters. Of course, it used to be the Standard Oil building. Today, if you go to the BP Chemical Oil Refinery in Whiting, Indiana, acres and acres of white marble gravel. Took all that marble, just ground it up into gravel, put it on the refinery. Right here behind the Swiss Hotel, see that that building with the wavy balconies there. The building is called the Aqua Building. It's designed by a wonderful Chicago architect. Her name is Jeannie Gang. But in 2009, that building won an award as the most beautiful residential building in the world. Not an exaggeration. If you have a chance, go visit it. It's a beautiful building. But that building used to be the tallest building in the world, designed by a female architect, Jeannie Gang. No longer has that distinction. This big blue wavy building here is now the tallest building in the world, designed by a female architect. And it's the same architect, Jeannie Gang, wonderful Chicago architect. It's the St. Regis Tower, third tallest building in Chicago, but the tallest building in the world designed by a female architect. This is the other building in the world this is the other building in Chicago that has the 2 mass dampers, the big water sloshing dampers at the top. Tallest tower up there, very windy up there. Again, tons and tons of water. If the building starts oscillating back and forth, this water sloshes around and dampens the effect of the oscillation. If you look about 20 floors down, too, you see a big gap in the floors. That is another accommodation for the wind. It's called a blow-through. And it is exactly what it sounds like. There's nothing there except the elevator shaft. It allows the wind to go blowing right through the building. You didn't want people spending millions and millions of dollars and then getting seasick because the building is going back and forth. Now, we're heading towards Lake Michigan. We got a minute or so to talk a little bit about this river. Chicago River is very unique. It has had the direction of its flow reversed by man. Originally, this river flowed the same direction that we're going right now, towards Lake Michigan. The problem was, in the 1800s, this was also the sewer for Chicago. Literally everything we didn't want got thrown in this river. Sewage, chemicals, garbage, animal carcasses, you name it. Horribly polluted, horribly contaminated body of water. The problem was, it emptied into Lake Michigan. That's where we got our drinking water from. So Chicagoans drinking all this horrible, horrible contaminated water. In the 1800s, we actually lost 10% of our population to cholera and typhoid from drinking all this terrible water. Everybody knew we had to do something about the water problem here. Today, we would clean up the river. Back then, their solution was, we'll just leave the river dirty, we'll just make it go in the other direction. We'll make it go away from Lake Michigan rather than into Lake Michigan. In order to do this, they had to dig a giant canal. They had to connect the south branch of this river to the Des Plaines River. The Des Plaines runs in the opposite direction. It connects to the Illinois, then the Mississippi, and then out to the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico is at sea level. We're about 700 feet above sea level, so of course water runs downhill. It took them 8 years to dig this canal. But on January 2nd, 1900, they tore down the berm, the water flowed into the canal, met up with the Des Plaines River, and like magic, like a great big siphon, started pulling the river in the opposite direction. So from that day on, the water flows away from Lake Michigan, not into Lake Michigan. Everybody in Chicago really, really happy. All that dirty water wasn't going in the lake anymore. Our friends in St. Louis were not happy with us at all. They were now getting all of our dirty water. So they sued us. Incredibly, we won the lawsuit. We can continue to send all that dirty water down there. Trial was held in Chicago. There were other people, though, who were not happy. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana, the other states that border Lake Michigan, they were saying Chicago's taking too much water out of Lake Michigan. 10,000 cubic feet per second leaving the lake and going down our river. So they sued us, too. That lawsuit took 28 years to finally get resolved. When it was all over, we lost. We had to figure out a way to restrict, to regulate how much water we took out of Lake Michigan. The result of that lawsuit is right in front of us, and we'll turn, if you can't see it, we'll turn in a little while, but there's a channel over there. One of our boats is pulling into it right now. It's the Chicago Harbor Lock. It's a lock system, a physical separation between the lake and the river. So if you want to go out into the lake, you got to go through that lock system. Now the lake is about 5 feet higher than the river. So every time a boat transits from the lake back into the river, that lock releases about 800,000 gallons of lake water into this river. So all the water that we're in right now used to be in Lake Michigan. In about 3 weeks, it'll be down on the Mississippi, getting ready to go out into the Gulf of Mexico. But we're going to turn around here. You guys have a beautiful photo op right behind us, the skyline of Chicago.